Hi everyone, this is Liz with The Restless Wild. Oh, my candle just went out. Can you even bullet journal and do a plan with me if your candle goes out before you even start recording? Okay, let's try this again. Hi everyone, this is Liz G with The Restless Wild, and I'm so excited to have you all here with me for 2021 Plan With Me. So, oh my gosh, seriously, what is wrong with this candle? Alright, we're gonna pretend things are fine. There's no smoke here. There's no smoke. This is fine. This is fine. Totally fine. Not good. This is not good. So the journal that I'm going to be using for the first half of 2021 is actually an Archer and Olive journal. I had one for the second half of 2020, so it was a very trusty, lovely journal for basically August through December. So with that said, I did buy another Archer and Olive. Woo, shiny. It does come in a lovely box, feels all luxe, and this is the first time I'm opening it, so you guys get to see it. Woo, shiny. And it is all beautifully packaged. Lovely notebook. I personally love the sketchbook style, which is not dot grid. So most journalists, most bujoers use the dot grid style, whereas I actually really prefer it to be pure blank white paper. And partly because that nice crisp feeling when you like first crack open a spine. Yeah. Sorry. So I like the sketchbook style because I will actually just sketch, and I find the dot grid very distracting, even if it's extremely faint. I just don't like the look of it. I like a pure white page. That is my personal preference. So get the journal that works for you. So jumping right in. Like I said, this is the Archer and Olive A5 Night Sky Blank Pages Notebook. I was really excited about this because it's basically Polaris and the Big Dipper on the front, and I was thinking, oh, that's a great theme for 2021 as a guiding light. So I'm going to go ahead and put my name in first, and I'm not going to set up an index because I've got my own system that I use, but I'm going to go straight into my first spread, which is my priority spread. So we'll talk about this in a little bit more detail, but I set this up at the start of every bullet journal as a way to have something at the front to set the tone for my journal and to keep me mindful of what's most important. This started off as a very simple drawing, and over the journals it has evolved into more detail. I did this design in my last bullet journal and I really loved it, so I recreated it exactly in this bullet journal. I do all of my drawings via pencil first. I like my drawings to be just so in particular, so I do it in pencil first, and then I'm going over it with my Sakura Pigma Microns. I will be using the Pigma Microns throughout this entire setup. That is my favorite tool, and quite honestly, it's the bulk of my tools. I don't use a whole lot of other supplies, except for I am throwing in some white gel pen later. So the inspiration for this is actually from this is from a chain letter, one of those chain emails. I don't know if you all remember those. I was not into chain letters at all, but I read this one time and it was a really good, it resonated with me. And so the gist is this. A philosophy professor once stood before his class with a large empty jar. He filled the jar with large rocks and asked his students if the jar was full. The students said that yes, the jar was full. He then added pebbles to the jar and asked again, is the jar full now? The students agreed that the jar was indeed full. The professor then poured sand into the jar and asked again. The students then agreed that the jar was finally full. The professor went on to explain that the jar signifies one's life. The rocks are equivalent to the most important things in your life, such as family, health, and relationships. And if the pebbles and the sand were lost, the jar would still be full and your life would still have meaning. The pebbles represent the other things that matter in your life, such as your work, school, and house. These things often come and go and are not permanent or essential to your overall well-being. And finally, the sand represents the remaining small stuff and material possessions in your life. These things don't mean much to your life as a whole and are likely only done to waste time or get small tasks accomplished. The metaphor here is that if you start with putting sand into the jar, you will not have room for rocks or pebbles. This holds true for the things you let into your life too. So if you spend all of your time on the small and insignificant things, like doom scrolling, you will run out of room for the things that are actually important. So in order to have a more effective life, you should prioritize important things in your life and then worry about pebbles and sand at a later time. And so that is exactly what this spread means for me. This is my priorities. So I have my mason jar, because of course I'm Southern. If I imagine a jar, I imagine a mason jar immediately. So I have my mason jar and it has its rocks. And just for effect, I like the idea of a mason jar full of rocks hanging out in a summer twilight with fireflies floating around. So just for artistic effect, I've got that in. And so I always go through and set this up at the start of every journal so I can keep it front and center. And whenever I get overwhelmed or distracted or I am struggling at any point or just want a good reminder, I come back to this and say, okay, what are my priorities in life? So everyone's priorities will be different, but I think it's important to have this documented somewhere just so that you can always come back to it. So we are just going to put the finishing touches on this spread and then we can move on to the next spread. Yay! So the next spread I'm going to set up is a place where I can record 4 of my core values. So I don't know about you all, but 2020 was a year of introspection and discovery. And I took out of that a sense that I wanted to focus on 4 core values in 2021. The 4 values that I went ahead and recorded for this upcoming year include creativity, adventure, curiosity, and community. Over the years, I have taken several workshops and personality tests in order to help develop my own core values. But to be quite honest, you can do this just by doing a quick Google search for a list of core values, going down the list and picking out the ones that really resonate with you, and pare it down to your top 4 or so, and ta-da, you can have your core values for 2021. You don't really have to do anything too fancy with a workshop or anything. You can really just pick it out and decide which ones resonate with you and go for that. Throughout this 2021 setup, I am using the theme of lotuses and water lilies. They have meaning for me, both in terms of personal meaning, and I also really resonate with some of the symbolic meaning of lotuses. And so I will be explaining that in a little bit more detail. But I am setting this up now with my mission statement. For the mission statement, you essentially will have I will statements. So these are ways to make your core values and priorities actionable. So for example, when I say I've got core values of creativity, adventure, curiosity, and community, mission statements are things like I will maximize my creativity and I will boldly pursue adventure and novel experiences. And I will maintain an open mind to other people and ideas. So those are just, use your verbs, action statements to take your priorities and core values into a personal statement. For anyone that's interested, water lilies basically float on the surface of the water, whereas lotuses actually rise up past the water. So if you've got a distinct stem and flowers and leaves sticking up out of the water instead of just floating on the surface, the ones that rise up are the lotuses. The ones that float are water lilies. At least that's what my general understanding is. I'm a bio major. You should totally trust me. So flipping over, we are going to start with a quote page, and this is from St. Francis of Assisi. It says, "All the darkness in the world cannot extinguish the light of a single candle." And I've always loved this quote, and I typically incorporate it in a bullet journal at some point. So just continuing that. And I'm also going to do a focus page. So essentially this is just to set an intention for 2021. So being able to identify what are some key areas that I want to focus on specifically for this year, you know, having it tie into my values and my mission statement, but being able to narrow it down and say, okay, this for the particular year is what I want to really hone in on and make sure that I am being intentional. So once we're done with that spread, we're going to flip it over and start working on our future log. The future log is essentially a way to track any upcoming events or important dates. I don't typically use a future log. I have a personal calendar and a work calendar that are online, so I heavily rely on those to keep track of things that I have to do. But it is nice having something, and I figured this would be a good option just to sketch out some future plans. I think I will mostly use this to pencil things in, quite literally with pencil, so I can play around and figure out what all I want to work on. I did get cute though and call this Future Dawns, and then on the next page I have it as Distant Horizons, so just trying to give it a little bit of fun. So one of the things that I include on my future log spread is the numbered weeks. I set up all of my weekly spreads with the week numbers, so week 1 and the spread, and then week 2 and the spread. So I like to be able to keep track of which of the 52 weeks we are in, and so I've included that here to make it easier. And then I'm just going to finish off this spread by doing a few lotus designs just to tie into my overall theme. And with that, we are done with our future log, and we're going to head on over to the next spread. What I'm going to do on this is set out a bucket list spread. This is not my complete bucket list. I am really extra, not just extra, I'm ultra with my bucket list. And so there is a complete bucket list post that's like 400 plus bucket list items on my blog. It's ridiculous. I acknowledge that. But what I do is create kind of a sub list of things to focus on. So for example, this year, I really want to focus on a coaching certification and a 50 miler. So those are things that I'm going to be particularly focused on checking off the bucket list this year. And then go ahead and setting up a pretty cover page for the actual year. So yay, getting into the actual year stuff. Woo! In keeping with the theme of water lilies and lotuses, my 2021 cover spread has 3 intertwined lotus flowers. The lotus as a symbol goes back for millennia. It was commonly featured in ancient Egyptian art as a symbol of rebirth and of the sun. In ancient Greece, the lotus eaters are featured in the Odyssey, though this time the lotus eaters are associated with intoxication and apathy, and are an obstacle to Odysseus' journey home. The lotus is also featured prominently in modern religions, including Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikhism, and Jainism. It is one of the 8 auspicious symbols of Buddhism, and the lotus flower throne is commonly portrayed with deities in Hinduism. Throughout its long history as a spiritual symbol, the lotus represents purity and enlightenment, and for good reason. The lotus flower originates in deep mud and rises unbesmirched as a beautiful flower. The lotus stands tall above the murky water, which symbolizes the murk of human suffering. And, well, don't we all hope to rise above the murk of this past year and find hope and enlightenment? And following up with that theme, we are going to start with another quote page. So this time I am using a Buddhist proverb, and it says, "The lotus flower blooms most beautifully from the deepest and thickest mud." So I just want to be very explicit about the theme that I was talking about before and incorporate that into my bullet journal spreads. And I will come back and fill in a little bit more detail on that, but for now I'm going to pop over to doing a goals cover. For this, I'm just going to draw water lilies and lotuses in a circle using line art and hatching, which I'll add in later. I'll also fill in the circle with black and then write over the black with white gel pen for a high contrast look. Of course, if you recreate any of this or use my printables, these designs are all done in a sort of coloring book style, so you could always add color to any of the spreads rather than keep it all black and white like I have in my journal. So, looking forward to setting goals. Some important things to consider when planning goals include your current habits. How do you spend your time right now? Next, consider the sort of daily or weekly activities you need to do that will align with your goals. The key to successful goals is setting up successful habits. And that's partly why I like bullet journaling so much. This planning method helps me to be intentional about major goals, and then I can set up monthly, weekly, and daily goals and habits that help me stay on track for my big goals. So, as you start planning for 2021, consider the following questions. First, what are you doing right now? How do you currently spend your time? Second, what would you instead like to do? Third, why do you want to do these things? Is it intrinsic motivation or external motivation that you want to tackle certain goals? And can you tie those goals to a specific personal value or priority? You really want your personal sense of self to be driving your goals and your habits so that you feel aligned and purposeful. And then fourth, what are some habits you can establish to help you achieve those goals? So some habits may include working with a coach or a team or a friend to have some accountability. Or maybe you can start by setting monthly and weekly goals and setting up some habit trackers. The purpose here is to set SMART goals. Your goals should be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. And your monthly, weekly, and daily habits will drive you to achieve those bigger goals. So very briefly here, I am setting up some annual goals. I'm not being too decorative with this because I really want to be focused on the functionality of the goals and setting up a few trackers, but also some one-off items. One of the key things here though is I am tying all of my goals back to the core values I identified earlier. So creativity, adventure, curiosity, and community. And then within that, I have categories. So for example, under creativity, I have writing, photography, and art. Under adventure, I have running, climbing, hiking, exploring, yoga, mountain biking, and strength training. And then under curiosity, those are just one-offs. But the intent here is to be able to set specific goals and measurable goals. So that's why I want to really focus on having space for trackers so that I can say, hey, I can come through and double check how successful was I based on how well I tracked for that goal. And then I do also have a sort of catch-all for growth, and these are really just personal goals and things that I just have to do, home improvement projects, budgeting, things like that. And then I do also want to set up a separate tracker area. So I am similar to doing the goals cover, I'm doing a trackers cover, and really the intention here is to provide some more details and context to some of the goals, and I will show some of that. But rather than just saying whether I did something or not, I want to be able to say, yes, so I went climbing 10 times and these were the 10 locations and the dates and which routes I did, things like that. So just being able to provide some more context. Probably a more common one would be a reading tracker. So rather than just saying I read 20 books in 2021, I want to be able to say, okay, which books were they? When did I read it? The title, things like that. So I had a good context for the data behind my goals and not just whether or not I hit them. So jumping straight into the first tracker, I am doing a reading log. I called it Fully Booked. I like to be cute with my titles, but they tend to come out cheesy rather than cute, but it's okay. I am setting up 2 pages because last year I only set up 1 page and I ran out of room and that was not great. So I am tracking the number, so just be able to quantify how many books I read. I'm also including title, author, and the stars. I'm also specifying whether I listened to it on an audiobook and if it is a Pulitzer Prize winner. For this next spread, I am tracking when I talk with or see family and friends. I can sometimes struggle as an introvert to remember when exactly I socialized with certain people, and I want to make sure that I am prioritizing those relationships. So what I have is the 52 weeks of the year and a row for each person that I want to prioritize relationships with. So that way I can track on a weekly basis whether or not I talked with or saw that person. The next tracker is a budget tracker, and while I don't specify what the goals are for each month, I do have a block for each month. So at the beginning of each month, I will set my budget goals and then determine whether or not I meet that. But I wanted to have a cute little piggy bank drawing to go with it. The next tracker I'm setting up is called #adulting. Many people call this the When Did I Last tracker, but this is keeping track of all the boring adult things you have to do, like doctor's appointments, dentist appointments, when's the last time I deep cleaned the kitchen. Boring stuff, but important stuff. The next tracker I'm setting up is the 52 Hike Challenge tracker. You can actually sign up for the 52 Hike Challenge online at 52hikechallenge.com. I like to also record in my bullet journal some information about the hikes that I do each year. So I have the number, the date, the description, the distance, the time, and the vertical gain. I like just to know how much elevation I get on each hike and add it up at the end of the year. All of this data is recorded via my GPS watch, but I just take information from Strava and put it in here just to track it all in one place. The next tracker I am setting up is a climbing tick list. Whenever you successfully climb a route, it is called a tick, so that is the purpose of the title. And the things that I'm tracking here are the date, the location, the route, the grade, and any notes about the climb. The next thing that I'm setting up is Peakbagger. This is where I'm tracking all of the mountain summits that I do in a year. The data that I'm tracking here include the number of unique mountain summits, the number of repeats for each unique summit, the peak name, the prominence, which is how much the mountain rises above its surroundings, the dates, and the highest elevation point of that peak. The last tracker I set up is my adventure log. I keep this really minimalist with just a title, and I've penciled in a half page for each month. This tracker is open-ended with qualitative data rather than quantitative data. So instead of numbers and metrics, I just keep a running list of all my adventures. These could be big trips, or long backpacking weekends, or races, or they could be micro adventures, like a Sunday stroll with friends, or a mountain bike ride at a local park. I love looking at this tracker at the end of the year because it's basically a highlight reel. I leave several pages blank so I can fill it in over the year, and then I'll set up my January spreads. And with that, we are ready for a full flip through of my 2021 bullet journal setup. So starting with my name, check, got that. And my priorities page so I can keep myself focused. My values page and a page for my mission statements. A quote page, and then a section for my focus and intention for the upcoming year. My future log part 1. And future log part 2. Very exciting. A quick page for a bucket list and my 2021 cover page. A quote page and a goals cover page. And then getting into my goals that are all tied to my values and categories with specific trackers so that I can make sure that my goals are specific and measurable and align with what I want to be focusing on. And then a cover page for my more detailed trackers, including a reading log, my family and friends log, a budget log and adulting log, blech. My 52 hike challenge log, my climbing log, my mountain summit log, and finally my open-ended adventure log. So with that, I will wrap up my 2021 bullet journal setup. I hope you liked it and found some inspiration. If you're interested, I will have printables linked in the video description, and I hope you'll follow along with my goals and bullet journal setup throughout 2021. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful new year. Take care!